Judge Dredd is the last film to become a cult classic, at least in the ways of films like Fifth Elemental, Pulp Fiction, Alien, Donnie Darko. Sure, it didn't really make a huge splash at the box office, but over time it has grown to having a strong and devoted fan base that love and appreciate the film. Even today, over 10 years later, the cast are still being asked for a sequel, and rumors still persist that it's going to happen.
If there is still talk of there being a sequel 10 years later, I am all for it.
But ultimately, the film itself is probably the reason why we'll never actually even get a sequel, or the TV show Mega City 1. You know, that show that we were promised over 6 years ago? And even more frustratingly, it might be time to face facts that the success of Dredd is its own undoing, and there are so many factors that go into why. Now look, I think it's easy to say that the financial loss that this film made was enough to stop anyone from talking sequels. And that's fair enough. Hollywood talks money, and the film just didn't make enough. However, there has been plenty of films that have gone on to make sequels despite box office failures, and with the sales from Blu-ray and DVDs, which was still a critical part of the film's success back in 2012, I'd be willing to bet to say that Dredd has gone and made its money back. But it's not just enough to say that the film did poorly financially and that's why we'll never get another sequel. There is more that goes into it, and to do that, we have to understand the comic books. If you walk into a comic book store, 60% of what is being sold is DC or Marvel. To make any significant impact outside of those two franchises is a massive deal. And so for a character that first debuted in 1977 and to still be popular and ongoing today, that is a massive win. And for this comic book character to still be going for almost 50 years, you get to explore so much that this world has to offer. You get to see the more comic and absurd elements, like when they all vote for an orangutan to become their mayor because Judge Dredd gives them the power to do it. Or you get to see the more dramatic side of this world where there's an uprising demanding that the people get democracy restored, and Judge Dredd goes against this himself in stopping this uprising. And he does so through corruption and police brutality. It's a story in a world that is as rich and bizarre and crazy as the world we live in. It not only serves as a reflection of how easily power corrupts regardless of whatever judicial system or political environment is in place, but how quickly everything can go wrong when nothing is done about it. And so when the movie came out, you would hope that this complicated mess of a world and absurdity and punk attitude would be a huge part of what makes the film's aesthetic. That this film would tackle that strange and bizarre place. It didn't embrace the world that Judge Dredd lives in and the response to that world. It doesn't take into consideration how it was the judges who are their own worst enemy, and how the cycle of violence will continue for as long as this system is in place.
Mama is not the law. I am the law.
But what we did get was a really entertaining, violent, action, superhero-esque movie where Judge Dredd kicked butt and was a tough cop. And to be fair, Karl Urban's take on Judge Dredd was almost perfect. For what he was trying to be in the film, he absolutely nailed that role. So despite the film merely scratching the surface of what this world has to offer, it still went on to receive high praise, scoring high on both Rotten Tomatoes and Internet Movie Database. But in the year of 2012, that didn't really matter, as it was quickly drowned out by its own competition. You're probably going to need some reminder of what 2012 was like. You had The Hobbit, one of the most highly anticipated films of the year. Sure, it wasn't the greatest, but it was coming off the backs of one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Then you had this tiny little adaptation called The Hunger Games, and oh yeah, The Avengers came out. The Avengers, Dark Knight Rises, The Amazing Spider-Man, Chronicles, Skyfall, Jack Reacher. Damn, this was a good year, or what? Paranorman, Brave, Prometheus, Looper, Lincoln. Okay, so with so many films being so successful that year, Drax's lack of financial success probably only forced Hollywood studios to focus more on their other major wins and less on a film that just barely scraped by and breaking even. Even in the comic book world, Judge Dredd struggles to make an impact as big as something as Marvel or DC. So to place that competition on the movie industry, you're gonna get crushed. So the movie never really had much of a chance to really grab its audience to its fullest extent because they were so spread on all of the other films that were coming out. both Marvel, DC, and otherwise. And then as a result of that, the money and the focus just shifted away from Dredd because they needed to focus more on what was going to be more of a guaranteed success. And it worked for them. And I think another big aspect to this was that the audiences just weren't ready for that level of violence and gore. John Wick wasn't set to release for another 2 years after Dredd, and Deadpool was another 2 years after that. And it wasn't until 6 years after Dredd that we had finally gotten The Boys and Invincible, some of the most violent superhero shows out there. Even Carl Urban himself has gone on to say that we just weren't ready for this kind of a movie, and I wholeheartedly agree that if Dredd was coming out in cinemas today, it would have been such a massive win, because as an audience, we've got that built in now to see more violent, more destructive characters on the big screen. So in the eyes of Hollywood, the film Dredd is just a go-to example of a franchise that just doesn't seem to want to be popular. It's the second film of them trying to make this franchise into a cinematic universe of some sort, and it's the second time that it's failed. It just didn't have the popularity that it really deserves. But the biggest problem that this film created for itself in its success comes from an audience that created a petition.
I just want to say on behalf of everybody involved with the film Dredd, from Alex Garland to the DNA boys to myself, we really, really appreciate it, and we're working very, very hard to bring you Dredd 2. So thank you so much, and please continue to support, because it really does help. Thank you. Take care.
Accumulated a total of roughly 300,000 signatures, which isn't anything to be shy of, but once again, you have to think in the eyes of Hollywood. And for something like the Avengers, which was making millions to billions of dollars, 300,000 signatures is barely enough to turn on the lights for the studio itself. And so the petitions only go to reinforce that the film just wasn't successful enough, and the fan base just clearly isn't there to guarantee a success, that if they were to put a huge level of investment into this franchise, that they would actually get a significant return. Flash forward to today, and the excitement around Judge Dredd as a comic book character is as strong as ever, and the fan base is there. There are new comics coming out every week or month almost, and you can read the comics starting with the complete case files, or you can go to the Judge Dredd Essentials. And if you were to go to any recent Judge Dredd video, and you're going to see nothing but praise and love for the film that came out in 2012. So there is a glimmer of hope that down the line that we're going to get some form of sequel, or Mega City 1 is going to come out, because there is a strong devotion to this world and to these characters. And what's more exciting is that the state of the industry is changing. Audiences aren't as focused on seeing superhero type of films. We're leaning more into the violent, more into the slightly darker, more into the slightly absurd films and TV shows. We want to see bigger, more creative takes, and we want to see more bizarre, more out there situations. So it's not impossible to think that Dreadbolt can fit nicely into where the industry is shifting into today. But personally, I don't even really want a TV show. I would much rather see Dredd turn into a video game. Give me a linear, third-person action shooter. Give me the ability to judge, jury, and execute. And then you can easily push more into the absurd, into the more out there and bizarre things and natures of the storyline without it seeming too outgoing or anything like that. And you can still take a storyline such as Apocalypse War and ground it into the setting of the video game. So while we'll probably never really get a proper, genuine sequel to this film, if anything, it will probably be a reboot if we were to get anything at all. But just know that this world, these characters, and these incredible stories are worth every bit and attention. And if you don't know where to start, then pick up Judge Dredd Essentials America. It'll be worth every penny you spend on it. But what do you guys think? Do you want to see more Dredd? Do you want Carl Urban back under the helmet? Leave your comments below, and as always, like and subscribe, and always make sure to take care of yourselves. Alright, peace.